My name is Alejandra. I was born and raised in the city of Reynosa in Tamaulipas, Mexico. It is a town situated in the borderlines of Texas and Mexico. That is, the place in which I completed my K-12 education. It was traditional, drill-based, and conservative. Memories of my schooling are vague. However, I remember being terrified of school, sciences, math, and even reading and writing. My teachers were mean. To me, a figure of authority, never someone I could trust. We were disciplined, rather in a cruel manner. School was rigorous, and I repeated a year. After my 20s, I moved to a town named Fredericksburg, Texas. Here, my world slowly began to change. I was being immersed into a new culture and a new language. I was able to utilize the already developed academic skills I owned, in addition to high levels of proficiency within my native language. This is how I constructed a solid foundation that got me to the place I am today, pursuing a master's degree in curriculum and instruction with a certification on language arts and social studies. I will discuss some of the most important aspects I have learned this semester. The education enterprise in the United States. Golden and Latson Billings present the historical and social-political nature of education. They were able to present historical and cultural aspects that have led to the systematic conditions we face today. Some of those aspects are economic disadvantages, lack of social political representation, and a lack of moral empathy towards the marginalized. It helps me understand the discrepancies that have left half of the nation without a proper education. As an educator, I aspire to inspire students and give back to those who have suffered from those discrepancies. I hope as an educator to be the biggest resource for my students. Interdisciplinary learning and teaching. Moran and Isani taught me about the historical development of the term interdisciplinarity, which represents the intersectionality that prevails between bodies and units of knowledge. It is important for subjects to intersect. Today's world requires an interdisciplinary approach that connects learning across and beyond disciplines and subjects. I personally was able to connect my prior academic knowledge and the proficiency of my first language across a curriculum that taught me to connect the pieces through the acquisition of my second language, English that is. Knowledge intersects, borrows, and it is constructive. Social justice in education. It is important that educators learn concepts and ideologies to ensure that all students get equal access to their education. Onion and Ferry do a great job at presenting a view against the banking school system approach. Education has been wrongfully denied by those systems that have conditioned us to be either the oppressor or the oppressed. Onion utilizes the term hidden curriculum to suggest that the education experience is based on social and economic status, creating a preconditioned society. This pervasive form of curriculum implementation is not meaningful, and it fails to prepare students to become equal participants in society by robbing students from skills that allows them to be critical thinkers, from making decisions, and from self-agency, and from having a voice. As educators, we must be critically conscious into what it means to provide a meaningful, liberatory education, one that provides opportunities for upward mobility rather than stagnation. Classic learning theories: behaviorist by Skinner, cognitivism by Piaget, and social constructivism by Vygotsky. The classic theories help educators create a framework of what it means to have knowledge and what it means to learn. Skinner argues in his behaviorist theory that we learn by observation, to stimuli, and motivation. I find this rather problematic since it negates retrospection and even intelligence. This theory can be utilized to address behavior problems in the classroom, but it should not be utilized as a framework of an entire curriculum. Piaget's theory of cognitivism acknowledges our cognitive powers and the necessity of learning by social transmission. However, it negates to tie down to the fact that to be able to transmit knowledge, one must have a structure of information set in place ready to receive that knowledge. Educators must understand that students are not empty vessels. Vygotsky, on the other hand, argues that for development to occur, learning must happen, as if it was a simultaneous process. This follows the idea that learning ignites development via social constructivism, thus significantly allowing students to build knowledge upon knowledge through social interaction. They are all significant, and they all can be borrowed from to create a curriculum that is appropriate to the needs of our students in accordance to their individual needs. However, we must be able to understand their strengths and their weaknesses. Neurotheories: Situated Learning by Levin-Wegner, Constructionism by Paper and Harrell, and Adult Learning by Knowles. Levin-Wegner talk about how we learn from the communities we live in by participating. This is something called situated learning. This theory explains how we create knowledge based on what we practice within a given society. It allows me to think that as an educator, I have to always be aware of how I present curriculum. The language I use and the language I allow within the school will be a setter of the environment as safe or not. I must be at a constant check and balance position, making sure that I am not a perpetuator of the system, but instead a creator of a safe space, inviting individualism. Learning about all of these theories gives me a profound understanding of education and theory. It allows me to create the foundation for a curriculum that fosters pedagogical methods of instruction that are meaningful in accordance to the needs of my students. Paper and Harrell, Learning by Making Theory, says that we learn as we construct, very familiar to constructivism, which builds knowledge as it creates knowledge upon knowledge. Constructionism creates knowledge the same way, but it gives the student a conduct to make sense of their world, making knowledge meaningful. It is a method of discovery and self-motivation. Lastly, Knowles teaches us about andragogy, adult learning. This theory addresses that adult students learn by utilizing self-motivation. Adults are mature and developed, and their interests are to make more money and perhaps have a better chance within their existing positions regarding opportunities for upward mobility. I find myself not favoring one theory over the other. I find that some are problematic, inconsistent, or could be challenged. Some of these principles can be utilized in different settings to target a specific situation. However, individually, they will fail to account for the learning and development of all students. The trick is the need to borrow from one to make the other one work. Like Piaget, I also believe that one of the most important factors of education are socially transmitted. And like Vygotsky, I understand that development and maturation precede learning and growth. This means that learning and development are contingent of one another. Papert and Harrell tied student learning to the student's world, which allows from self-motivation and agency. When I borrow from these theories, I understand that learning occurs as a developmental phenomenon through social constructivism and constructionism. For example, a child must have a structure in place, a fund of knowledge, to receive a transmit of knowledge, and in order for that unit of knowledge to stick and make sense. We must be able to connect it to what we already know and to our world. Today's students, as I have explained earlier, I have been able to be successful in a country that is different from the one I was brought up at, with a new language. I believe that the use of some of these theories and its pedagogical approaches, learning was able to take place. Today I can name these theories and be analytical about them. Students are not empty vessels. They possess their own repertoire of skills and knowledge. We as educators have the responsibility to help them be successful. We as educators are just another resource that helps them with their development. Just to conclude, let me not forget to mention that the use and appropriation of some of the learning theories require, in addition, the appropriation of specific strategies and methods of instruction. We tend to forget that our classrooms are diverse regarding their abilities, culture, needs, and identity. At the end of the course, we get introduced to significant strategies that are relevant to today's learners. Scaffolding for Cultural Diverse Populations by Lee, Schools That Value Sexual Diversity by Mayer, Inclusion of Students with Disabilities by Harrower, and Technology in Schools by Prensky. The goal should always be to advocate for the best education of all students. My plan of action, I believe, is simply to never stop trying, to always bring creativity into my classroom, and to always exhaust my options to keep my students motivated and learning. One theme I noticed throughout all their learning theories was the significance behind student motivation. This is the biggest tool. Aside from content, a means to motivation must be implemented within the curriculum. This will be accomplished by making learning meaningful. As an educator, scaffolding language and content, building knowledge by utilizing students' funds of knowledge, hands-on activities, flexibility, and most importantly, technology will be the tools that will allow me to initiate that motivation.